Some films leave a feeling that stays with you, that lives with you. Sinners is one of those films, and I think I know why. The title of the film lends itself to the belief that this movie is about sinners. But at the end of it, viewers are left with the question, well, who are the sinners and who are the saints? And if you peel back the layers, you realize that the villains are not always the villains. The victims are not always the victims, and the heroes are not always the heroes. And I'll give you some examples. Some would say, and Sammy's father would surely say, the sinners are the drunkards and philanderers who shirk their responsibilities to their families so they can sweat over one another. That's what Sammy's father would say. And then on the other side of that line that he drew would be the saints, the people who commit themselves to the church, the people who are in the pulpits, the ones who know the scripture, who sing on the choir, who serve the Lord. Those are the good guys. But then if you take a step back from that simple line that's drawn, where will we put Sammy? Right? Because Sammy not only had the gift of music, he also could recite the Bible verses. He was a good worker. He brought people together through the gift of his music. So where would he fall on that line between the saints and the sinners? And then if we think about his father, if you notice the way he is shot, that scene in the beginning of the film where Sammy is telling him he's going to go to the juke joint, he's going to play his music, and his father walks after him and says, you keep dancing with the devil, one day he's going to follow you home. If you take a look at his eyes have that same hazy glaze that we see with Remick, we see with Stack when he turns, we see with Mary when she turns. It is a very subtle nod to an answer that the saints aren't always the ones in the church and the sinners aren't always the ones on the outside. If we don't have a clear answer on who the saints and the sinners are, well, maybe we can cast it in the living and the half dead, the vampires and the living. Maybe the vampires are the bad guys and the living are the good guys or good gals. But then that would leave us with Stack. And Stack is someone who was both, we got to see him as a living human being and a half dead vampire. And even in the midst of his turning Annie, he did that out of love. That was not out of spite. That was not out of evil. Remember, Smoke killed their father to save Stack's life. And in Stack's mind, he probably thought that in turning Annie, he was repaying his brother for what he did, thanking him. What did he say? Everything's going to be all right. This was not, that turning or attempt to turn Annie was not out of malice. That was out of love. So we have a vampire doing something out of love. And you're going to tell me that he's the bad guy? And even when he was living, we heard stories of some of the things that he did. He was a sex trafficker. He was a pimp, right? So it can't just be that the living are the good guys and the bad guys are the vampires, because even then there are wrinkles in that equation. Another example, Remick. Remick was one of the most humanized villains I have seen in quite some time. And what I mean by that is we actually got to know his story. And we didn't get his origin story, which is what we experience a lot when we have these hyper villainized characters. We didn't get just the origin story. We got more of his story. We got his people's history. And you rarely get that. And I think the reason why Ryan Coogler did that was very intentional. It was, again, to ask the question, are you sure this is the villain? Because his people were victims of colonialism. They were victims of religiosity taking over their land. Now, I will say, everyone that saw the film would agree that the KKK, Hogwood and his crew, were the villains. But even if we take that and unpack it just ever so slightly, even that calls into question Ryan Coogler's commentary on the villains. We never see Hogwood or any of the KKK in their white robes and hoods. We see their faces, we see them in their overalls and their baggy ill-fitted pants and clothes, looking a hot mess. That's who we see. One thing I really found interesting about that scene where the KKK pull up to kill everyone in the juke joint is that they again are not wearing their hoods. And I would say it was on the probably 5011th watch of this film that stood out to me. And I'm like, wait, where are their hoods and where are their white robes? And it was almost as if Ryan Coogler was reading my mind, that question, where is the white hood and robe? He answered it with a scene of the church and all of the churchgoers in the choir dressed in all white. This is a very clear visual question and answer. We have the Christians in the church reciting the Bible verses, praising the Lord, and those same verses will be cited and used to justify racism. So what the movie does in the course of asking and sometimes answering this question is it humanizes everyone. And that is the key. You as the viewer have to answer the question and re-answer the question because you're getting to know the good guys and the bad guys equally. They all get a story. I spoke about this in another video. Ryan Coogler told full body stories for at least 10 characters. There's Stack, there's Smoke, there's Annie, there's Mary, there's Delta Slim, there's Sammy, there's Cornbread, there's Perline, there is Remick, there is Grace and her husband, Little, and they all don't live on the good side or the bad side, if you will. So if we don't have a clear answer on who the good guys and the bad guys are, and as we get to know these characters, our answer may change and evolve. The question is, there has to be a villain. There has to be. Maybe if we scale back, we take a wide angle shot of how all of these characters moved and how they got to where they are, we will see that there are some villains that don't necessarily exist in human form. And I would say one potential villain is religion. And I know some people are going to get upset about that, and that's just, it is what it is. A very clear example of that is Sammy's father. This man saw his son enter in the church, bloody, torn, and tattered. He did not look concerned at all. His only concern was making sure that Sammy dropped the guitar. That was it. Drop the guitar, Sammy. It wasn't, son, are you okay? Like, who did this? Who did this to you? They're living in the dirty South in the era of Jim Crow. Your black son walks into a church, bloodied, bruised. The first thought that should come to any empathetic, loving father's mind is, who did this to you? Are you okay? But that's not what came to the preacher's mind. That wasn't the first thing. That is one of the clearest commentaries on religion that I've seen displayed in modern cinema in quite some time. So we have religion as in the posse of the bad guys. If we scale back even further, what is left? And I'd offer it's capitalism. And we don't get a lot of commentary on capitalism, but we do get instances of a subtle, quiet whisper, nod to look over there. That's who you need to watch. Annie says, I don't want that blood money. Smoke says, all money comes with blood. She says, not like yours. She agrees that all money comes with blood, especially in that day and age. Who else? We have Smoke uptight and upset that people are using their plantation sharecropper coins to pay for the liquor they stole. We have Hogwood, who intended to kill people, but still took their money at the end of the day. So there is we have Grace and Smoke negotiating. Numbers got to always be in conversation with one another. We have this subtle nod to look over there because there is something that is in the atmosphere that you cannot and may not be able to outline in human form, but it is in the midst of all of this. The structure of capitalism and how it even in that system, the villains are not always the villains. The victims are not always the victims. And the heroes are not always the heroes. He literally advises the viewer to zoom in certain instances and pull back. We have, yes, it was a cinematic, historic feat to have multiple aspect ratios shot on film. That was groundbreaking. That was historical. But I think it was more than just a fun thing to do, right? There are moments when you are encouraged. Some of the widest angle shots are over the plantation and the fields. That's when we get a full lay of the land. We get to see the land in all its glory. And then we pull in and we see the people working the land. And then we get closer and we see the stories, the songs of the people, their eyes, their pain, their history. And he invites you to pull in, zoom in, get to know this person that you probably would have cast and put on either the good side or the bad side so quickly. Zoom in a little bit. See what's really going on here. And here's something I think a lot of people missed in the film, is that Bert and his wife, the couple that Remick turned after he was being chased by the Choctaw, they lost a child. And you know this because in that scene when his wife is calling him after she shuts the door on the Choctaw, she's calling him and she's walking into that dark hallway. And we see Remick in a rocking chair. And we see Bert on the floor, and what's behind him is a crib. You don't hear the sound of a child. So at some point, she either was expecting a kid and she lost it, or they had a child and they lost it. Who else experienced that same form of loss? Smoking Annie. The loss of a child is a grief that only another parent can understand. And we never got to see Bert and his wife, I can't remember her name, and Smoking Annie be in communion with them. We never get to see that. But I bet you they had more in common in the role of parents than Smoke and Annie did when it came to Grace and Bo, who were also parents, who were also the good guys. There's a through line that crosses and blurs the line of who the saints and the sinners are, the good guys and the bad guys, and the good women and the bad women. And that's the beauty of this film, is that it really invites you to reconsider your frame of reference. And it does it in such a cinematic, beautiful, authentic way. And that's why Sinners is a film that doesn't just end when the credits roll and the post-credit scene ends. It's a film that stays with you.